They laughed when he stopped the car in the rain. The voice begins low and steady as sheets of water slam against the windshield and neon lights blur across the soaked street. A man's voice cuts through the storm. "You'll get robbed, man, just drive." Another adds, chuckling, but Daniel Hayes doesn't move. His hands tighten on the steering wheel for a second, then release slow, deliberate, like a man who has already decided who he is. Not just tonight, but long before this moment. In a back seat, his 8-year-old daughter Lily leans forward slightly, her small fingers gripping the worn fabric of the seat. She doesn't say anything. She just watches because she knows that look on her father's face, the one that always means he's about to choose kindness even when it costs him, even when no one else understands. Outside, under a flickering street lamp, a woman sits on the curb, soaked to the bone, her coat clinging to her frame. Her hair darkened by rain, strands stuck to her. Cheeks, cars rush past, tires slicing through puddles. No one slowing down, no one stopping, not for her, not tonight. Daniel exhales once, quiet, then opens the door. The rain hits him instantly, cold and relentless, soaking through his shirt in seconds. But he steps forward anyway, each step steady, measured, as if the storm itself has no say in what he's about to do. "Ma'am," he calls out, not too loud, not demanding, just enough to reach her. She looks up slowly, her eyes sharp, alert, not broken, not weak, something else, something that doesn't quite match the scene. "I'm fine," she says quickly, almost rehearsed, her voice firm but her hands trembling just enough to betray her. Daniel pauses, just for a breath, not to question her, but to understand the space she's holding around herself. Then he nods once, respectful. "Okay," he says, simple, no pressure, no pity, just acknowledgement. And then, without another word, he takes off his jacket, the one he uses every day, worn at, the sleeves still warm from his body, and gently holds it out, not forcing it, not stepping closer than he should, just offering quiet dignity in the middle of chaos behind him. The laughter from the passing car fades into the rain, replaced by the soft hum of engines and the steady rhythm of water hitting pavement. Lily opens the back door slightly, peeking out, her eyes meeting the woman's for a brief second, and in that silent exchange, something shifts, not loud, not dramatic, just a small, almost invisible crack in the wall the woman has built around herself. The kind of crack that only kindness can make. And for the first time since the storm began, the night doesn't feel quite as cold. The rain did not slow. It only grew heavier, drumming against the pavement like a warning no one else seemed willing to hear. The woman stared at the jacket in Daniel's hands, as if it carried more than warmth, as if it carried intention. And that was something she had learned to question. "You do not have to do this," she said, her voice quieter now, less certain. Daniel gave a small nod, not stepping closer, not filling the silence with explanations. "I know," he replied simply. Lily shifted. In the back seat, pushing the door open just a few inches more, the soft yellow light from inside the car spilling into the rain. "It is warm in here," she said gently, her voice small but steady, the kind of voice that did not carry fear, only honesty. The woman's eyes flickered toward her, and for a brief second, something unguarded passed through her expression, not weakness but memory. Daniel noticed it, but did not comment. He only lowered the jacket slightly, making the offer easier too. Except, never forcing into her hands, never closing the distance she had not given him permission to cross. A car sped by, splashing water onto the curb. The moment could have broken right there, but it did not. The woman reached out slowly, her fingers brushing the fabric first as if testing whether it was real. Then she took it, pulling it around her shoulders, the motion small, almost reluctant. But it changed everything. The rain still fell. The street still echoed with distant engines. But the space between them softened. Daniel stepped back half a pace, giving her room to breathe. "There's a diner about 2 miles from here," he said, his tone calm. Not persuasive, just information. "Or we can take you wherever you need to go." She hesitated, her gaze drifting down the street as if calculating something invisible, something far beyond the rain and the cold. "I do. Not have anywhere right now," she admitted, the words landing quietly, without drama, without asking for sympathy. Daniel did not react with surprise. He did not ask questions that would turn kindness into an exchange. He only nodded again, the same quiet respect. Then you can sit in the car until you figure it out, he said. Lily smiled softly from the back seat, shifting over to make space that had already been offered before it was needed. The woman looked at both of them. Really looked. This time, at the worn edges of Daniel's sleeves, at the simple car, at the child who trusted without hesitation, and something inside her shifted again, deeper this time. She stepped forward, slow but certain, and as she reached the open door, she paused just long enough to say, almost to herself, "People do not usually stop." Daniel gave a faint, almost invisible smile. "I am not most people," he said, and for the first time since the storm began, she did not argue. She simply got into the car, pulling the door closed behind her, and the sound of the rain outside suddenly felt farther away. The engine hummed softly as the car pulled away from the curb, the rain now a steady rhythm against the roof instead of a wall between strangers. Inside, the air was warmer, quieter, but not yet comfortable, not yet familiar. The woman sat in the front passenger seat, her hands resting lightly over the jacket, as if unsure whether she was allowed to keep it. Her eyes moved once across the dashboard, the worn radio, the faint crack in the air vent, details most people would ignore, but she noticed. Everything. "You always pick up strangers in storms?" she asked, her tone calm but searching. Daniel kept his eyes on the road. His voice even, "No," he said, a brief pause, then added, "just the ones who look like they need it." Lily leaned forward slightly from the back seat, her seat belt snug across her small frame. "We have hot chocolate at home," she said softly, as if offering something more valuable than it sounded. The woman glanced back at her, surprised by the certainty in her voice. "Home," she repeated quietly, testing the word like it had been a long time since she used it without hesitation. Outside, streetlights passed in long streaks of gold across the windshield, each one fading into the next. Inside, silence settled again, but it was different now, less guarded, more thoughtful. "You did not ask my name," the woman said after a moment. Daniel shook his head slightly. "You can tell me if you want," he replied, not pressing, not turning the moment into a transaction. She studied him for a second, then looked forward again. "Claire," she said finally, the name landing softly in the space between them. "Daniel," he answered, just as simply, and then, almost as an afterthought, "That is Lily." Lily gave a small wave, a shy smile following it. Claire nodded once, acknowledging her not as a child, but as someone who had already given her something real. The road stretched ahead, slick and reflective, the kind of road that made everything feel slower, more deliberate. "You trust people easily," Claire said, her voice carrying something between curiosity and disbelief. Daniel let out a quiet breath, not quite a laugh. "No," he said again, "I just try not to assume the worst." Claire looked down at her hands, the fabric of the jacket still damp at the edges. "That is not how the world usually works," she murmured. Lily spoke again, her voice gentle but certain. "It works for us," and that simple sentence hung in the air longer than anything else had. Claire did not respond right away, but something in her posture softened, her shoulders lowering just slightly, as if she had been carrying something heavier than the rain. Daniel turned onto a quieter street, the noise of traffic fading behind them. The houses here were small, spaced close together, porch lights glowing warm against the dark. Nothing extravagant, nothing hidden, just ordinary life continuing despite the storm. "We are almost there," Daniel said, his tone unchanged, steady, predictable, the kind of voice that did not shift depending on who was listening. Claire looked out the window, taking it all in, the simplicity, the absence of pretense, the quiet dignity of it. And for the first time since she stepped into the car, she did not look like someone preparing to leave. She looked like someone wondering what it would feel like to stay, even if only for a moment. The car rolled to a gentle stop in front of a small house, its porch light casting a warm amber glow against the steady rain. Nothing about it stood out, no grand design, no polished perfection, just a place that had been lived in, cared for, held together by quiet effort. Daniel turned off the engine, and for a moment, no one moved. The sound of the rain returned, softer now, like it no longer had the power it did before. "This is us," he said simply. Claire looked at the house, then back at him, as if measuring something she could not quite name. "You are sure?" she asked, not about the house, but about the invitation itself. Daniel nodded once, calm, certain, yes. Lily was already unbuckling her seatbelt, her small movements quick but gentle. Come on, she said with a soft smile, as if this had already been decided long ago. Claire hesitated for half a second more, then reached for the door handle, stepping out into the cool air. The rain had softened to a mist, clinging lightly to everything. Daniel walked ahead, unlocking the front door with a quiet click, then stepped aside. Not leading, not directing, just making space inside. The house carried the scent of something familiar, something warm, wood, a hint of cinnamon, the kind of smell that does not come from decoration but from repetition, from days lived with care. Lily slipped off her shoes near the door and patted inside. I will make hot chocolate, she announced with quiet pride. Already moving toward the kitchen, Claire stepped in slowly, her eyes adjusting, taking in the small details, a worn couch neatly arranged, a stack of books by the corner table, a child's drawing taped carefully to the wall. Daniel closed the door behind them, the sound sealing off the outside world. Bathroom is down the hall, he said, gesturing lightly. There are clean towels. Claire nodded, still silent, but her posture had changed, less guarded, more present. She walked down the hallway, her steps soft against the wooden floor, and when she returned, her hair slightly damp, but no longer dripping. She looked different, not because anything had changed on the surface, but because the tension she carried had begun to loosen. Lily placed a mug in her hands, steam rising gently. Careful, it is hot, she said, her voice carrying quiet care. Claire wrapped her fingers around the mug, feeling the warmth settle into her skin. She took a small sip, then paused. Something about the simple taste, sweet, familiar, seemed to catch her off guard. Daniel watched from a distance, not intruding, not asking if she liked it, just allowing the moment to exist. You did not ask anything, Claire said after a while, her voice softer than before. Daniel leaned lightly against the wall, his expression calm. You will tell me if it matters, he replied. Claire looked down into the cup, the steam rising in thin, quiet lines. And if it does not, she asked, almost to herself. Daniel gave a small, almost unnoticeable smile. Then it does not need to be said. Silence followed, but it was not empty. It was steady, grounded, like something finally at rest. Claire sat down slowly on the couch, holding the mug with both hands. And for the first time in what felt like a very long time, she was not thinking about where she had to go next. She was simply there, in a place that asked nothing from her. And somehow, that was the most unfamiliar feeling of all. The warmth of the house settled in slowly, not overwhelming, not forced, just steady, like it had been waiting without expectation. Claire sat on the edge of the couch, the mug still in her hands, her fingers wrapped around it as if it anchored her to something real. Lily curled up on the other side, quietly flipping through a small book, occasionally glancing up with a soft smile that did not ask questions. Daniel moved through the kitchen with simple, practiced motions, rinsing a spoon, setting it aside. Nothing rushed, nothing loud, just a rhythm that belonged to a life built on quiet consistency. You live like this every day, Claire said after a while, her voice thoughtful, not judgmental. Daniel looked over briefly, then nodded. Most days, he answered, his tone even. Claire exhaled slowly, almost a breath she had been holding for too long. It is calm, she added, as if the word itself surprised her. Daniel leaned lightly against the counter, considering that calm is not something people usually notice, he said. Claire gave a faint, almost distant smile. That is because most people do not have it. The room fell into a gentle silence again, the kind that did not need to be filled outside. The rain had softened into a light drizzle, tapping faintly against the windows inside. The clock ticked quietly on the wall, marking time without urgency. Claire's eyes drifted across the room again, stopping on a framed photo on the shelf. A younger Lily smiling wide, missing teeth. Daniel beside her, his arm resting lightly around her shoulders. No grand background, just a moment captured without effort. You built this on your own, she said, more a statement than a question. Daniel followed her gaze, then nodded once. With her, he corrected gently. Claire looked at Lily, who looked up at that moment and smiled again. Unguarded, simple, real, and something in Claire's expression shifted, deeper this time. Not just curiosity, not just caution, but recognition. People do not stay. Claire said quietly, her voice lower now, closer to something honest. Daniel did not respond immediately. He did not rush to reassure or contradict. He simply listened, giving the words space to exist. They say they will, she continued, her eyes lowering to the mug again, but they leave when it stops being easy or when it stops being useful. Lily's small voice broken gently. Not challenging, just present. My dad does not leave. Claire looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, the room felt very still. Daniel met Claire's gaze then, calm, steady, not defensive. I stay because it matters, he said simply. Claire's lips parted slightly as if to respond, but no words came. Instead, she looked down again, her grip on the mug tightening just enough to show something beneath the surface, something unresolved. You did not ask what I do, she said after a long pause. Daniel shook his head slightly. It is not why you are here, he replied. Claire let out a quiet breath, something between disbelief and relief. Most people would have asked by now, she said. Daniel gave a small, almost invisible shrug. Most people are trying to understand what they can gain, he said, then added softly, I am not. The words settled into the room. Not heavy, not dramatic, just true. Claire leaned back slowly into the couch, her shoulders finally easing against it, as if the weight she carried had nowhere left to hold on, and in that quiet space, surrounded by nothing extraordinary, she realized something she had not expected. For the first time in years, she was not being measured, not being evaluated, not being needed for anything except her presence. And that simple, quiet truth felt more unfamiliar than anything else she had faced. The night grew quieter as the hours passed, the rain fading into a soft whisper against the windows, and somewhere between the ticking clock and the warmth of the room, Claire felt something unfamiliar settle inside her. Not safety exactly, but the absence of pressure, the absence of expectation. Daniel stood by the sink rinsing the last mug, his movements unhurried, while Lily had drifted closer on the couch, her small frame leaning gently against Claire's arm without asking permission, as if trust did not need to be negotiated. Claire glanced down at her, surprised at first, then still, allowing it, not pulling away, not correcting the moment, just letting it exist. She trusts quickly, Claire said softly. Daniel dried his hands with a towel, his voice calm. She trusts what feels right. Claire looked at Lily again, then back at Daniel, something thoughtful passing through her eyes. That is rare, she said. Daniel gave a slight nod. So is keeping it. Silence followed, deeper. This time, not empty, but full of things unspoken. Claire shifted slightly, careful not to wake Lily, her gaze moving toward the window where the last drops of rain traced slow lines down the glass. I used to think trust was something you earned by proving yourself, she said quietly, almost as if speaking to the room rather than to him. Daniel did not interrupt, did not correct. He simply listened. But it turns out, she continued, her voice steady but distant, most people are only proving what they want from you. The words lingered, heavier than anything said before. Lily stirred slightly, her hand resting lightly against Claire's sleeve, a small, grounding presence. Daniel leaned back against the counter, his arms relaxed at his sides. That happens, he said simply, not dismissing it, not deepening it, just acknowledging it without judgment. Claire let out a faint breath, her shoulders lowering just a little more. You make it sound simple, she said. Daniel shook his head. Gently, it is not simple, he replied. It is just a choice. Claire looked at him then, really looked, as if trying to understand how someone could say that without hesitation, without weight. And you always choose like this, she asked. Daniel paused for a moment, considering the question then. Answered honestly, not always, he said, but I try to. Lily's voice came softly, half asleep. He always does. Claire's lips curved into the smallest smile, not wide, not bright, but real, and for a moment, the room felt lighter. You believe that, Claire said to Lily. Lily nodded slightly, her eyes barely open. Yes, she murmured, then settled again into stillness. Claire looked down at her, something warm and unfamiliar rising behind her eyes, something she did not push away this time, something she allowed to stay. The clock moved forward, the house holding its quiet rhythm. And then, after a long pause, Claire spoke again, softer now, more certain. "I will leave in the morning," she said, not as a request, not as a question, but as a decision already made. Daniel nodded once, accepting it without hesitation, without asking why. "Okay," he said, "nothing more. No attempt to change it. No need to understand it. Just respect." Claire watched him for a second, as if expecting something else, some resistance, some curiosity. But it never came, and that absence spoke louder than anything else could have. She leaned back slowly into the couch, Lily still resting beside her, the warmth of the house settling around them. And for the first time in a long time, she closed her eyes without calculating her next move, without planning her next step, knowing that by morning she would be gone, but also knowing that something quiet and undeniable had already changed. Morning arrived quietly, not with noise or urgency, but with a soft gray light slipping through the curtains, the kind of light that does not demand attention, only presence. Daniel was already awake, standing in the kitchen with a cup of coffee cooling slowly in his hands, his eyes not on the clock, not on the day ahead, but on the quiet stillness that came before everything began again. Lily sat at the table, her hair slightly messy, her small hands wrapped around a warm mug. "Is she still here?" she asked gently. Daniel nodded once. "For now," he replied, his voice calm, steady like the morning itself. Down the hallway, Claire stood by the window in the guest room, the jacket folded neatly on the chair beside her, her gaze fixed on the street outside, now dry, ordinary, as if the night before had never happened, but she knew it had. She felt it in the way her thoughts moved differently, slower, less guarded. She picked up the jacket, her fingers tracing the worn edges for a brief second, then set it back down, not taking it with her, not because she did not need it, but because some things are not meant to be carried away. Footsteps approached softly. Daniel stopped at the doorway, not entering fully, just enough to be present. "Coffee is ready," he said. No pressure, no expectation. Claire turned, giving a small nod. "Thank you," she replied, her voice composed, but quieter than before. They walked back into the kitchen together, not side by side, not distant either, just sharing the same space without forcing conversation. Lily looked up immediately, her face brightening in a way that carried no hesitation. "Good morning," she said. Claire returned the greeting with a faint smile, sitting down across from her. The table between them simple, familiar, grounding. For a moment, no one spoke. The sound of a spoon lightly touching ceramic filled the space. Then Claire set her cup down gently. "I will be leaving now," she said, her tone steady, not rushed, not uncertain. Daniel nodded once, the same quiet acceptance as before. "Okay," he said, nothing added, nothing taken away. Lily's expression shifted slightly, not sadness exactly, but awareness. "Will you come back?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. Claire looked at her, really looked, as if the question reached somewhere deeper than it should have. She paused, just long enough for the silence to carry meaning. "I do not know," she answered honestly. Daniel did not react, did not fill the moment with reassurance. He simply stood there, respecting the truth as it was given. Claire reached in her coat pocket, then stopped, her hand lingering there for a second before withdrawing empty. She looked at Daniel, something unspoken passing between them. "You did not ask who I was," she said quietly. Daniel shook his head. Slightly. "It did not matter," he replied. Claire held his gaze for a brief second longer, then gave a small nod, as if confirming something to herself, something already decided. She walked toward the door, her steps measured, unhurried. Daniel opened it for her. The morning air cool but calm, nothing like the storm that had brought her there. She stepped outside, then paused, just at the edge, turning back slightly, not fully, just enough to speak. "Not many people would have done what you did," she said. Daniel leaned lightly against the doorframe, his voice even. "Maybe," he answered, then added, "but it only takes one." Claire's expression softened for just a moment. Then she turned and walked away, her figure moving down the quiet street until she disappeared from view. The door closed gently behind her, the house returning to its familiar stillness. but something had shifted, something quiet and unseen, and neither Daniel nor Lily spoke about it, because some moments do not need to be explained to be understood. Days passed the way they always did, quiet and steady, the kind of days that did not announce themselves as important. Daniel returned to work at the small auto shop on the edge of town, his hands moving through routine repairs, oil changes, worn brakes. Nothing extraordinary, just honest work that paid just enough to keep things going. Lily went to school, her backpack slightly too big for her shoulders. Her voice always bright when she said goodbye. But that week, something subtle had shifted. Daniel noticed it first in the bills stacked a little higher on the kitchen counter, then in the call he received from the landlord, polite but firm, reminding him of what was due, not today but soon, always soon. He nodded through the call, calm, respectful, the same way he handled everything. But when he hung up, he stood still for a moment longer than usual, as if measuring something he could not quite fix with his hands. That evening, Lily sat at the table, her homework spread out in front of her. "Are we okay?" she asked softly, not afraid, just aware. Daniel looked at her, his expression steady. "We are," he said, and he meant it, even if the numbers did not always agree. Outside, the sky had cleared, the streets dry, the storm long gone, but its memory lingered in small ways, in the jacket still hanging by the door, untouched since that morning, in the silence that sometimes followed, when nothing else needed to be said. Then, a few days later, something unusual happened. Daniel was tightening a bolt under the hood of the pickup when the sound reached him first. Not loud, not dramatic, just different. Engines that did not belong in this part of town. Smooth, controlled, unfamiliar. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, and turned toward the street. 3 black SUVs pulled up in a line, their presence quiet but undeniable, the kind that did not need attention to command it. The other mechanics paused, exchanging glances, unsure what to make of it. The doors opened almost in sync. Men in tailored suits stepped out, not rushed, not aggressive, just precise. One of them approached Daniel directly, his posture respectful, his voice measured. "Are you Daniel Hayes?" he asked. Daniel nodded once, calm but alert. "Yes." The man gave a slight nod, as if confirming something important, then stepped aside, and from the second vehicle, a familiar figure emerged, not hurried, not hesitant, but composed in a way that carried quiet authority. Claire walked forward, her presence different now. Not because she had changed, but because the world around her revealed what had always been there. Her coat was dry, tailored, her posture steady, but her eyes were the same. Daniel did not speak immediately. He simply looked at her, not surprised, not impressed, just present. The men around her remained still, waiting, as if the moment belonged only to the two of them. Claire stopped a few feet away, the space between them filled with everything that had not been said that morning, and in that silence, something shifted again, not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable, because this time she had not come back alone. She had come back with a world behind her. And yet, the only thing that seemed to matter was the man who had never asked who she was. The air in the garage seemed to still as Claire stepped closer, the soft echo of her heels against the concrete floor replacing the usual hum of tools and quiet chatter. The men behind her remained at a respectful distance, not interrupting, not speaking, as if they understood that whatever this moment was, it did not belong to them. Daniel set the rag down slowly on the workbench, his hands calm, his posture unchanged. He did not straighten his shirt, did not adjust himself to match the presence that had just arrived. He simply stood as he was. "You found me," he said, his voice even, not surprised, not impressed, just acknowledging. Claire gave a faint nod, her expression softer than the world around her suggested. "I said I might come back," she replied. Daniel gave a small, almost invisible smile. "You said you did not know." Claire's lips curved slightly, not denying it, not correcting it, just accepting the truth of both statements. The mechanics nearby had gone completely quiet now, watching without pretending not to, the black vehicles outside reflecting the afternoon light like something from another world. And yet, inside this space, nothing about Daniel changed. Claire took another step forward, closing the distance just enough to make her words feel personal, not public. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, not with pride, not with challenge, but with something closer to curiosity. Daniel looked at her, really looked the same way he had that night in the rain, steady, present. "No," he said, and then after a brief pause, "And I did not need to." The words settled between them, quiet, grounded, real. Claire exhaled slowly, something in her shoulders easing. Not because she had been holding tension, but because she no longer needed to. "Most people do," she said softly, "before they decide how to treat me." Daniel nodded slightly. "That is their choice," he replied, then added, "Not mine." A silence followed, deeper than before, the kind that carried understanding without explanation. Claire glanced briefly toward the men behind her, then back at Daniel. "They wanted me to bring an offer," she said, her voice still calm, still measured. "A better job, a house, security, everything you might need." Daniel listened without interrupting, his expression unchanged, and she continued, "They expected me to explain why." Daniel tilted his head slightly, not questioning, just acknowledging the weight of what was being said. Claire's eyes met his again, clearer now, more certain. "But that is not why I came," she said, and for the first time since she arrived. The world behind her seemed to fade, not gone, but irrelevant. Daniel did not respond immediately. He gave her the same space he had given her before, the same quiet respect that had never tried to shape her words. Claire took one more small step forward, her voice lowering just enough to make it belong only to him. "You helped me when I had everything," she said, each word deliberate, unhurried, "and you did not ask for anything in return." The garage fell completely silent, even the distant sound from the street seemed to pause. Daniel held her gaze, not looking away, not stepping back, just present. And in that moment, nothing about the cars, the suits, the money, or the distance between their worlds seemed to matter. Claire's expression softened into something unmistakably real, something unguarded. "I came back," she continued, her voice steady but warmer now, "because what you gave me was something I could not buy." Daniel let out a quiet breath, not disbelief, not relief, just understanding, and for a brief second, the corner of his mouth lifted, not into a full smile, but enough to carry meaning, enough to say that he had never done it for this moment. And that was exactly why it mattered. Around them, no one spoke, no one moved, because sometimes the loudest kind of justice is not in what is said, but in the silence that follows when everyone finally understands.